They boarded their vessel without permission, they smashed the boat's equipment, and they threatened the Filipino soldiers with knives and spears. China's bullying in the South China Sea is once again raising the risk of conflict. Meanwhile, in Israel, the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, has issued a significant statement. They say it is impossible to completely eliminate the Hamas. In India, students are outraged after yet another key exam was cancelled because of a paper leak. After North Korea, Vladimir Putin has reached Vietnam. We'll tell you what's on his agenda. After sponsoring terrorists for years, Pakistan is complaining about terrorism at the United Nations. The heat wave has taken more than 1,000 lives during the Hajj, and why scientists in Antarctica are developing a new language. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi meets former US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and other American lawmakers. It comes a day after they met the Dalai Lama in Dharamshala. Pelosi launched a blistering attack on the Chinese president after meeting the Tibetan spiritual leader. Beijing had expressed strong objections over this visit. In India, relief for Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal. He gets bail in the now scrapped liquor policy case. In the month of March, Kejriwal was arrested by the Enforcement Directorate. He is accused of money laundering. In May, the Supreme Court had granted him bail to campaign for the election. The Bank of England opts against cutting the interest rate before the election, keeps it at a 16-year high of 5.2%. This is despite inflation easing in the UK. But the Swiss National Bank announces its second straight interest rate cut. In March, it became the first Western central bank to slash borrowing costs. Ecuador suffers a nationwide power outage for several hours. Around 18 million people left in the dark due to an electrical grid failure. The blackout cripples metro services and road traffic. In recent months, Ecuadorians have had to deal with planned power cuts of up to 13 hours at a time. Outgoing Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte to become the next head of NATO. His sole challenger, the Romanian president, pulled out of the race. Rutte will assume charge at a crucial time for the alliance. As the Ukraine war drags on, the current NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg's term ends on the 1st of October. And French hotels sue Airbnb for unfair trade practices. More than 24 hotels are seeking $10 million in damages. They claim that the US-based platform does not collect or pay tourist taxes. It is the most dangerous escalation in the South China Sea so far. What you just saw happened on Monday. Chinese sailors crossed a line and launched an unprecedented attack, the kind that could easily trigger a conflict. Let's look at those pictures again. That's a Philippine Navy vessel at the center, surrounded by the Chinese Coast Guard. You can see a Chinese soldier in an orange life jacket. He's threatening the Philippine Navy officer with an axe. There is another Chinese soldier behind him, and he seems to be wielding a sword. And from here, the situation deteriorated. Chinese troops deployed tear gas. They hurled rocks. They blared sirens and strobe lights. Some Chinese troops boarded the Philippine boat and they destroyed it. The boat's equipment was smashed. The Chinese troops punctured the rubber boat. They took away phones and rifles of Filipino personnel. It was excessive and brutal. 8 Philippine officers were injured. One of them suffered serious injuries. He lost his right thumb. The confrontation happened in this region, near the second Thomas Shoal. This is part of the disputed South China Sea. Beijing stakes a claim to the second Thomas Shoal, but Manila currently controls it. In recent years, Beijing has challenged Manila's claims. The Chinese have sent a large number of Coast Guard ships. They've engaged in a number of provocative actions, all of it near the second Thomas Shoal. They've rammed into Manila's ships. They've fired water cannons at them. The Chinese have tried to establish a blockade around this shipwreck, the Sierra Madre. This is a World War II era ship. It was deliberately marooned by the Philippines in the 1990s, mainly to assert its claims on the second Thomas Shoal. The Philippines has stationed Marines on it, on the shipwreck. They have Marines, and these Marines need supplies. So every now and then, Manila sends a boat or a ship with supplies for the soldiers. China has actively tried to block these missions, these supply missions. And Monday's events are a sign. The Chinese are resorting to more aggressive tactics. The same strategy that they've used with India on the Himalayan border. More aggression, more provocation. Since 2020, Indian and Chinese troops have clashed on more than one occasion in Ladakh. This is along the line of actual control, or LAC. And here too, the Chinese use sticks and rods to attack. Now they're doing the same with the Philippines and justifying it to boot.
The Philippines, in defiance of China's warnings, insisted on trespassing on Ren'ai Reef in China's Nansha Islands. This is the direct cause of the incident. The Chinese Coast Guard at the scene has taken professional law enforcement measures with restraint, which aimed at stopping the illegal supply mission by the Philippine vessels, and no direct measures were taken against the Philippine personnel.
They say they acted with restraint. If using knives and axes is restraint, what is excess? Where is the restraint in boarding naval ships without permission and then wrecking and looting them? The Philippines says only pirates do this. And we couldn't agree more. This is an act of aggression by China, and they don't seem to be interested in de-escalating tensions. Over the weekend, there was a fresh provocation. So China introduced a new law. It gives the Chinese Coast Guard sweeping powers. It allows them to seize foreign ships and detain their crews. They can be kept in Chinese custody for up to 60 days, and that too without a trial. The Philippines is a clear target of this new law, and their president has issued a warning to China.
If by a willful act on a Filipino, not only serviceman, but even a Filipino citizen, if a Filipino citizen is killed by a willful act, that is, I think, very, very close to what we define as an act of war, and therefore we will respond accordingly.
If the Chinese Coast Guard arrests any Filipino, it will be like an act of war. That's how President Marcos Jr. sees it. And he has support from Washington. The US has condemned the Chinese attack. They've called it, and I'm quoting, irresponsible and escalatory. The Americans have a defense treaty with the Philippines, a treaty that was signed in 1951. It's a mutual defense treaty. It says that if any one of them is attacked by a third party, both countries will help each other. And after the Chinese attack this week, Washington has reaffirmed its commitment to this pact.
It's reckless, and it threatens regional peace and stability. And finally, this escalatory incident is the latest in a series of provocations by the PRC to impede critically needed supplies from reaching service members stationed at the Sierra Madre, and those actions reflect consistent disregard for the safety of Filipino lives and for international law in the South China Sea.
Yesterday, Manila sent a message to Beijing urging China to avoid actions which endanger the lives of sailors. The Philippines says it wants a dialogue. But that cannot happen until Beijing dials down tensions on the high seas. The situation is still volatile. China needs to de-escalate and pull back its troops. Else, we are heading into another conflict at one of the most dangerous flashpoints in the world. Speaking of which, let's turn to the war in Gaza. It's been almost 9 months now. In this time, Israel's position has been the same. We want to destroy the Hamas. That's what they've said throughout. We want to eliminate this group completely. But Israel's army says that's impossible. Look at what an army spokesperson said, and I'm quoting, "This business of destroying Hamas, it's simply throwing sand in the eyes of the public. Hamas is an idea. Hamas is a party. It's rooted in the hearts of the people. Whoever thinks we can eliminate Hamas is wrong. Now, this is a big statement. Israel's army says you cannot destroy Hamas. It's impossible. But that's not what Benjamin Netanyahu has been saying. He kept telling the world that Israel would destroy Hamas, not once, not twice, but multiple times. Listen to this.
The elimination of Hamas is a necessary step to ensure that the day after there will be no element in Gaza that threatens us. We spoke about recent developments in the war, including Israel's commitment to achieving all of the war's objectives, eliminating Hamas.
To win this war, we must destroy the remaining Hamas battalions in Rafah.
The necessary goal of the war is first of all the elimination of Hamas. We will continue to fight until all the objectives of the war are achieved, and the priority is the elimination of Hamas.
So who should we trust, the Israeli military or the Israeli Prime Minister? As expected, the statement has triggered a controversy. Netanyahu's office has commented on it. They reiterated Israel's official war goal, to destroy Hamas. The military also released a clarification. They said that the spokesperson was talking about the Hamas ideology and not the group. But I'm afraid that the damage is done. The public spat has confirmed the obvious. There are divisions between Netanyahu and his military. We saw that earlier this week too. Israel's military announced a tactical pause in Rafah. Again, Netanyahu was not happy. He was totally opposed to any pause in fighting. Before that, the defense minister rebelled. He asked Netanyahu to plan for post-war Gaza. Again, the prime minister refused. And all of these developments confirmed the divisions. But the question is, what has caused it? There are three main reasons. The first one is tactical. Netanyahu wants his army to defeat Hamas in Rafah. But what comes after that? Who will govern the Gaza Strip? Without a plan, Israel could face insurgencies, and the army is not keen on that. They would like some clarity on the next step. The second reason is military support, mainly from the US. Netanyahu's policy has already enraged Washington. They have withheld one shipment of bombs. But what if more shipments are paused? Israel's army may run out of firepower, which brings us to the third reason, a second front in this war. At this rate, we cannot rule it out. Israel and Hezbollah are regularly exchanging fire, Hezbollah in Lebanon. Last week, Israel took out a senior Hezbollah commander. In response, they fired rockets at northern Israel. It's a very dangerous situation. On Wednesday, Israel's army released operational footage. It shows them striking 7 targets in Lebanon. Take a look at this. The Hezbollah says it's ready for war, and it's not just threatening Israel, it is threatening Cyprus too. Now, Cyprus is an island on the west of Lebanon. It has a defense agreement with Israel. Both sides have held joint drills in the past. Cyprus has also allowed Israel to use its airports. But all of that was during peacetime, not in the middle of a war. Nonetheless, Hezbollah is not taking any chances. They're warning Cyprus too.
If the war is imposed on Lebanon, the resistance will fight without control, without rules, and without a ceiling. Cyprus should be warned that opening Cypriot bases and airports to the Israelis to target Lebanon means that the Cypriot government has become part of the war. And the resistance will deal with Cyprus as if it is part of the war.
Cyprus has denied these claims. They say no military support is being given to Israel. But how serious is the Hezbollah threat? Well, the US is really concerned. This week, Joe Biden sent a special envoy to West Asia. In Beirut, he met Lebanon's parliament speaker, who is an ally of Hezbollah. The US official called for de-escalation at the border. But the problem seems to be Netanyahu. Hezbollah could have intervened any time in the last 9 months, but they did not. And what does that tell you? There is no appetite for war in Lebanon, not unless Israel escalates. And that's where Netanyahu's actions are worrying. Consider what he did with Iran. The regime in Tehran was watching from the sidelines, but Israel killed their top commanders in Syria. That's when Iran attacked Israel. And now Netanyahu is going after senior Hezbollah commanders. Again, the same agenda, to draw out this war and to keep the Americans interested. It's a very risky and dangerous strategy. But then again, that's been Netanyahu's game plan throughout. Vladimir Putin in Vietnam. He's gone there after visiting North Korea. It's the last leg of his Asia tour. Yesterday, like we told you, he was in North Korea. Today, the Russian president landed in Hanoi. The day started with a welcome ceremony. There were children waving flags, bands playing, even a 21-gun salute. Not as grand as Pyongyang, but it was quite big by Hanoi standards. After that, it was the business end of the visit. The main focus is their strategic partnership, and it's an old one. In fact, the oldest for Vietnam. Russia was the first country to sign a strategic partnership with Vietnam. They did it back in 2001. Putin was the leader of Russia then too in 2001, and now he's visiting to strengthen this partnership.
Russia attaches great importance to the issues of further strengthening the traditionally friendly Russian-Vietnamese comprehensive strategic relations, strategic partnership relations.
So Putin met Vietnamese leaders, he held multiple meetings, he talked about trade, signed deals on energy cooperation and discussed some international issues as well.
We also touched upon current international issues. I would like to emphasize that the positions of Russia and Vietnam largely coincide or are close.
That's the point that Putin is trying to drive home, that the West may be trying to isolate him, but he still has partners and friends. And Moscow's relationship with Hanoi goes back all the way to the 1950s. When Vietnam was a new communist state and Moscow gave it economic support, diplomatic recognition and military backing. Thousands of Vietnamese students studied in Soviet universities, including Nguyen Phu Trong. He's Vietnam's current Communist Party chief. Over the decades, Vietnam saw multiple wars and Moscow came to their rescue. It gave them fighter jets, tanks, helicopters, even soldiers, 11,000 of them. Even after the Soviet Union fell, the ties remained strong, and it shows everywhere. Take Hanoi's architecture, for example. Most old buildings have a Soviet touch. And not just that, Vietnam's Ho Chi Minh Mausoleum houses the body of its founding father, Ho Chi Minh. His preserved body is on display there, but every year the mausoleum is closed for 2 months. Do you know why? Because the embalmed body is flown to Russia for maintenance. Such is their relationship. It's a unique friendship, and a key aspect of it is military ties. Russia is Vietnam's largest military supplier. It accounts for 80% of Vietnam's armed exports. Nearly all of their naval vessels are from Russia. And defense remains the focus on this visit as well. Putin has arrived with his defense minister here, and while Vietnam's reliance on Russian weapons is significant, it is looking to diversify. And that's because of the fear of Western sanctions. In fact, this state visit was also condemned by the United States. So Vietnam doesn't want to take any chances. It is diversifying its sources. Which brings us to the country itself. Why Vietnam? Why did Putin choose Hanoi? And the answer is quite simple. Vietnam is like the new cool kid on the block. It's a rising economy, a manufacturing powerhouse, a leading exporter of goods, and for companies leaving China, it's one of the compelling alternatives. So everyone wants to be friends with Vietnam. And when we say everyone, we mean everyone. Last year, US President Joe Biden was in the country. The two nations upgraded their relations. Soon after that, Chinese President Xi Jinping followed. His was a grand visit too. And now it is Putin's turn. It's his 5th visit to Vietnam. So there's a clear pattern. Every country wants Vietnam in their corner. But who is Vietnam choosing? The answer is no one. They want to do business with everyone. And it's their age-old strategy. They call it bamboo diplomacy. It's inspired from the bamboo plant. Strong roots and flexible branches, bending in all directions. And Vietnam is keeping it quite flexible right now. They're keeping their options open, not isolating anyone, at the same time refusing to be tied up in alliances. It's a strategy that has paid off until now, and they do not plan to change it. This latest visit by Putin is proof. Vantage continues after a short break.
More than 30 are still hospitalized. Some of them are in critical condition as per the hospital authorities. So clearly the death toll could only increase in the coming hours, which is why politics over this is going to escalate, because just 1 year ago, which was in September 2023, there were twin hooch tragedies reported in Tamil Nadu, one in Viluppuram and one in Chengalpattu districts, where 22 people lost their lives because of consumption of illicit liquor. And just a year later, yet another tragic incident took place in Kallakurichi, where at least 30 of them have died. The death toll could increase because we'll have to wait for the official information, but at least 30 of them have lost their lives because of consumption of illicit liquor. Remember, yesterday there was one person who was suspected to have carried at least 200 liters of illicit arak was arrested. Right now, investigation is on, probe is on to see if the 200 liters of illicit arak contains the deadly methanol. Because police officials say that prima facie investigation reveals that consumption of methanol led to the tragic incident where at least 30 people have lost their lives. Both the AIADMK and the BJP have in fact pointed fingers at the DMK, blaming the DMK, saying that the DMK has not learnt its lessons, because just in 2023 we saw twin hooch tragedies in Tamil Nadu, and in less than a year yet another tragic incident took place. So they say that because of the administration lapses, yet another tragedy took place because of illicit liquor being made available freely under the DMK rule. That's the question that both the BJP and the AIADMK have raised, saying that the DMK has not learnt its lessons, have not taken measures to stop the illicit sale of liquor and distribution of methanol. That's the word coming in from the AIADMK and the BJP. This will be raked up in the assembly session. Today, the assembly session met, condoled the death of those who lost their lives after consumption of illicit liquor. But tomorrow, we could expect a heated debate in the assembly over hooch tragedy, with both the AIADMK and the BJP blaming the DMK. DMK meanwhile says that action has been taken against those who were responsible for this, but that is not enough, is what the opposition says. Politics over hooch tragedy in Kallakurichi has only escalated, with the AIADMK General Secretary and Leader of Opposition Edappadi Palanisamy planning to visit Kallakurichi Government Hospital to take stock of the situation. DMK meanwhile says that action has been taken against the district administration who were responsible for the hooch tragedy. The Superintendent of Police has been...
Meanwhile, guess who's complaining about terrorism? Pakistan. It's the mother of all ironies. They spent decades using terrorism as state policy, but now they have problems with it. Why? Because those same terrorists are attacking Pakistan. Let's look at the complaint first. It came from Pakistan's ambassador to the United Nations. He was addressing a special meeting on weapons, especially small and light weapons. There he called for a campaign to recover arms from terror groups. There was special reference to one, the TTP or the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. Let me quote from Islamabad's statement. Terrorists and criminals do not manufacture these arms. They acquire them from illicit arms markets or receive them from entities that want to destabilize a particular region or country. How about that? It's like one of those second-grade tests. The teacher has asked Pakistan to write an essay about itself, and this is the perfect answer, a country that gives weapons to destabilize another country. Pakistan has been doing it to India. Hundreds of Pakistani weapons have been found in Kashmir. They were used by terror groups to spread chaos. Was that not problematic? Back then, Islamabad said nothing. They kept funding and arming terrorists in Kashmir. So why the outrage now? Because this time, Pakistan is the victim. Let me tell you about the TTP, the group they're complaining about. It's a largely Pashtun terror group in Pakistan. It also has ties with the Afghan Taliban. They're sort of like ideological cousins. The TTP's fight is against the Pakistani state. They want to capture power. They want to run the country based on Sharia, basically replicate what happened in Kabul. And this group is on a roll. TTP attacks increased by 60%, 60, in the last 2 years. Almost 800 attacks were reported in 2023. They resulted in more than 1,500 deaths, many of them security personnel. And 2 provinces are the worst affected, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Balochistan. Together, they make up 84% of the attacks and 90% of all the deaths. And that tells a story, because both these provinces also border Afghanistan. Islamabad has asked Kabul to control the TTP, but the Taliban have refused to do it. They have given safe haven to TTP fighters near the border. They've also given them weapons. And not just any weapons, American weapons. When the US withdrew from Afghanistan, they left behind a lot of weapons, some $7 billion of arms. Reports say the TTP is using some of these American weapons. We're talking about deadly equipment here, like M16 machine guns and M4 assault rifles, which brings us to Pakistan's latest complaint. They're unable to handle this threat, so they want global support. An appeal was made in March as well. Pakistan used the United Nations Security Council to build pressure on Kabul. They said Afghanistan should rein in the TTP. But like I said, no luck. The world has more than enough on its plate. There are 2 major wars, a looming conflict in the South China Sea and a resurgent ISIS in Africa. So Pakistan's TTP problem is not on top of the agenda. Nonetheless, Islamabad will keep raising it. They are wooing investors from China and West Asia, but all of them are demanding security. They want their assets to be safe. So Pakistan's economy is also pinned on fighting the TTP. Plus, they need military aid. The US halted Pakistan's aid program in 2018. Some of it has been resumed under Joe Biden, but Pakistan's army will want more. All of this explains their decision to raise the issue at the United Nations. Pakistan wants to globalize the TTP problem. But again, 2 questions remain. Number 1, will it work? Looks unlikely right now. Pakistan cultivated multiple terror groups to bleed its neighbors, whether it was India or Afghanistan. Now, those same terrorists are targeting Pakistan. It's a self-created problem. So Pakistan will get little sympathy. And question number 2, will it make Pakistan change its policy on terrorism? Again, unlikely. Yesterday, 2 terrorists were killed in Kashmir. The Indian Army says both were Pakistani residents. They belong to the Lashkar-e-Toiba. And who supports the Lashkar-e-Toiba? The Pakistan government. So TTP or not, Islamabad will not change its ways. They will always have their good and bad terrorists.
Honest students suffer and students who want to cheat benefit.
Months of preparation, years of investments, and for some, a wait of a lifetime. That's what is at stake in India. I'm talking about the recent examination controversies. First was the NEET exam, a common test for medical courses. Now it's the NET exam. NET stands for National Eligibility Test. Say you want to become a professor at an Indian university or you're eyeing a research fellowship. Then NET is your ticket. Your success depends on your NET score. This year's exam was held on Tuesday. Almost 900,000 candidates appeared for the test. 9 lakh. It was organized across 317 cities. But guess what? That exam has been cancelled. Why? Listen to India's Education Ministry.
On the 19th of June, the UGC got some inputs from the Home Ministry's Cybercrimes Department. From those inputs, the Education Ministry realized that there's a chance that the examination may have been compromised. We took prompt action by cancelling the examination to protect the interest of students.
There was a tip-off from the cyber cell, a possibility that the exam paper was leaked. Later, the Education Minister confirmed this. He said the question paper was leaked on the dark web. So the NET exam was cancelled. And what happens next? Well, the CBI, the Central Bureau of Investigation, is investigating this case. Meanwhile, another exam will be conducted at a later date, which means more delay, more public expenditure, and more tension for the candidates. But this problem goes beyond just NET. We've told you about the NEET controversy. It has two different parts. First is about the grace marks. The NEET exam started late in some locations. The students said we did not get enough time, so the testing agency came up with a solution. Grace marks for more than 1,500 students. More than 1,500 students received these extra marks. Not everyone is happy about it. Some students called it unfair. They filed complaints in courts across India, so the testing agency backpedaled. They've offered to retest these students, a retest instead of the grace marks. That's the first issue. The second issue is paper leaks. This investigation, the paper leak investigation in NEET, is happening in the state of Bihar. 4 men have been arrested so far. They say they got the NEET question paper 1 day before. If true, this is massive and very serious. NEET is the first step towards becoming a doctor in India, so fraud is not just unethical, it's a matter of life and death. More than 2.4 million students took this test. All of them are in a state of limbo now. As expected, this controversy has become political. Today, a few students met Congress leader Rahul Gandhi. Afterwards, he blamed the BJP for this fiasco.
This is extremely damaging to students, and it's happening because all our institutions have been captured. Our vice chancellors are placed not based on merit, but because they belong to a particular organization. And this organization and the BJP have penetrated our education system and destroyed it. What was done by Mr. Narendra Modi to the economy with demonetization has now been done to the education system.
Let's focus on 2 questions now. 1, how do these papers leak? And 2, how can it be stopped? Now, most of these standardized tests are organized by the NAT, the National Testing Agency. It was set up in 2017. It works under the Union Ministry of Education. The NAT organizes a lot of elite exams, like the JEE, the NEET, and the NET. Now, put together, their exams affect 10 million students in India. And the government is now cracking down on them. Today, the Education Minister spoke to the media. He said a high-level panel will investigate affairs at the National Testing Agency. He also said the culprits would not be spared.
I want to assure you that after the investigation, the culprits will be strictly punished, whether it's the NTA or some high-ranking official at the NTA. We will take recommendations from a high-level panel on reforming NTA structure, functioning, examination process, transparency and security protocol.
Now we come to the leaks. How do they happen? Many people are involved in making question papers, in drafting, in checking, in publishing, in transporting, and in distributing, so the paper can be leaked at any of these stages. All it takes is one corrupt official. So the problem is not political, it is systemic. Which brings us to the second question. How can we stop it? This year, the Indian Parliament passed a new law, sort of like an anti-paper leak law. And what does it do? It calls for strict punishment in case of leaks. Say someone has used unfair means to take an exam. If convicted, they face strict punishment. 3 to 5 years in jail plus a fine of up to 10 lakh rupees, which is around 12,000 US dollars. But sometimes these leaks are not organized by one person. They're done by a group, in which case the punishment is stricter, between 5 and 10 years in jail, plus a minimum fine of 1 crore rupees, which is $112,000. So the law is very clear on leaking papers, yet it doesn't seem to have stopped. Reports say there have been 41 paper leaks in the last 5 years. They have affected 1.4 crore applicants. When a paper leaks, it sets off a chain of events. The retest is delayed, the admission is delayed, the academic session is delayed, and public money is wasted. Not to mention, exam integrity is lost. So the government needs to get a grip on this. Normally, students pass or fail in exams, but this time the system has failed. And do spare a thought for the students. Imagine what they go through. The tension, the uncertainty, the anxiety, we can't even begin to comprehend it. So the government must remember the mental toll on students, because every time a paper leaks, their dreams are dashed. So retest is not the best solution. The root problem must be addressed. What is India's biggest asset? One of it is its strategic location. India is surrounded by water on 3 sides: the Indian Ocean, the Arabian Sea, and the Bay of Bengal. This gives India access to the world's most significant trade route. 65% of India's trade comes through the sea. And India needs more ports to fully leverage this potential. In recent years, India has taken major steps to improve its ports. The capacity at least 12 ports has been doubled. And now New Delhi is about to embark on its most ambitious project yet. India is gearing up to build its biggest seaport. Our next report tells you more.
A world-class port inside one of India's biggest trading and financial hubs. The plan was in the works for a while. Yesterday, the Indian cabinet finally pulled the trigger.
This port has the potential to be among the top 10 ports in the entire world. That's the significance of this port.
The project is an ambitious one. It's worth well over $9 billion. The Vadhavan port will be built here, in the Indian state of Maharashtra. The state already has the Jawaharlal Nehru Port, or JNPT, that's India's second largest container port in India. But Vadhavan will be bigger. Not only will it take the load off the JNPT, but this new port will significantly improve India's capacities. On paper, the project seems promising. This will be an all-weather port, meaning it will operate all year round, unaffected by the weather. In terms of capacity, the port will handle 298 million tons of containers. That's the same as thousands of football fields. This will significantly enhance India's ability to handle large cargo. One major advantage is the location of the port. Vadhavan will be able to serve 2 important trade corridors. The ambitious India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor. This is a proposed trade route which will connect India to Europe through the UAE. It will also be able to serve the International North-South Transportation Corridor, or INSTC. India, Russia and Iran had started this trade initiative. It can simplify India's access to 4 regions, Northern and Western Europe, as well as Central Asia and Eurasia. Today, at least 13 countries are members of the INSTC. This trade initiative was signed in the early 2000s, but its full potential is yet to be unlocked. The Vadhavan port will play an instrumental role towards that. Due to its location on India's west coast, the port can serve as an important trade hub for the Arabian Sea. It will be able to handle container traffic from Africa's east coast as well as from countries in the Persian Gulf. It will also be well connected to key Indian cities and highways. The Vadhavan port will be built just 140 kilometers from India's financial capital, Mumbai. For those wishing to send cargo to Delhi, the Delhi-Mumbai freight corridor is barely 34 kilometers away from Vadhavan. The development of India's coastline is a long overdue goal. India is surrounded by the sea on 3 sides, so more ports could help India unlock new trade opportunities. They can also provide valuable strategic support in the event of an emergency. The maritime sector accounts for 95% of India's trade volume. So these ports are not just beneficial for the economy, they are a necessity.
Now let's talk about the UK, about their embattled Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. He's facing an election on the 4th of July, exactly 2 weeks from now, and the predictions are dire. Sunak's Conservative Party, also known as the Tory Party, is facing a rout. That's what opinion polls say. They're looking at their worst defeat since 1997, when they were reduced to 165 seats. This time, the Tories could struggle to hit triple digits. That's according to some recent polls. And what's worse, Sunak may lose his own seat, the seat of Richmond. That's what one opinion poll is predicting anyway. And if this happens, if Sunak loses his seat, it would be a disaster for him. It would be the first time in British history that a sitting Prime Minister would have lost their seat. And this constituency is a Conservative Party stronghold. The Tories or Unionists have held it since 1910. That's 114 years. So as you can see, Rishi Sunak is staring at a disaster, which may be why he pulled a strange move. Sunak seems to be taking inspiration from his roots, his Indian roots. Look at this social media post. The message is simple: buy British. Now, every Indian knows this sentiment. It goes back to India's freedom struggle, to Mahatma Gandhi and his famous Swadeshi movement. That's why it looks like Sunak is going back to his roots. He's at risk of being ousted by the British, so he's taking inspiration from a man who routed the Brits instead. It's certainly a unique campaign strategy, trying to get Britain to go Swadeshi. And it has led to some hilarious reactions on social media. But there's a small problem here. Britain hasn't been self-reliant in food for centuries. Remember colonialism? The British Empire where the sun did not set. Do you remember how it started? It was with the East India Company coming to India for tea and spices and eventually everything else. This was how Britain built an empire, but it also had a side effect. Indigenous British food was supplanted by food from around the world. Centuries of mooching off foreign lands can do that. Now, this wasn't really a bad thing for the UK, especially when you think of what traditional British cuisine is: fish and chips, beans on toast, and turnips. We are drawing a blank on other examples. Because for years, no one had to remember the bland stuff. The British themselves had swapped their boring diet for plates of chicken tikka masala, which had become their national dish. So colonialism brought the British some flavor, but now along comes Rishi Sunak with his Buy British movement. What will this mean? Will the British go back to fish and chips? If yes, then how? Because fresh fish may be a bit hard to catch these days. The British rivers are filthy now because of all the raw sewage being released into them. So perhaps fish and chips is a non-starter. How about the turnips then? Will the humble root be able to fight back against modern British taste buds? Again, non-British vegetables like tomatoes. The Tories tried convincing people to do this last year, swapping turnips for tomatoes. It did not really work. But it seems that Sunak is having another go, rebranding the turnip push as buying British. The jokes aside, it seems like Rishi Sunak is flailing, trying every strategy in the book in the hopes that something sticks and quells public anger. But the problem is his Conservative Party. The Tories are to blame for a lot of Britain's current problems. Sunak says buying British will help local farmers, but his own party undermined the same farmers by signing questionable free trade agreements. And of course, Brexit. Brexit upended Britain's agricultural sector and farmers are still trying to recover. Considering all this, Sunak's Buy British movement may have a hard time getting off the ground, and he may not really care if it does. Because let's face it, there are 2 weeks to go for the election. The Tories are staring at a rout, so Sunak may not have to come up with a Swadeshi action plan anyway, which is almost a shame. Because if nothing else, Indians would have loved to see Sunak spreading Mahatma Gandhi's teachings in the UK. Now let's turn our attention to Islam's holiest city, Mecca, in Saudi Arabia, where nearly 2 million Muslims began the Hajj pilgrimage last week. But as they reached the end yesterday, for many, the journey proved fatal. The heat has been unrelenting. Temperatures have reached 51.8 degrees Celsius and more than 1,000 Hajj pilgrims have lost their lives. This includes people who travel from across the world, including at least 68 Indians who have died.
Yesterday we were on our way and we saw corpses on the road. They were covered with a white sheet because the temperatures here are really high. And I'm not just talking about old people, young people have died too. It was a very hard day because of the extreme heat. A lot of people died. The ambulances were overwhelmed. You would talk to someone and suddenly they would die.
Unregistered pilgrims made up more than half of the deaths. Without cooling or healthcare resources, they perished in the intense heat. And that's not all. Thousands of others suffered from heat exhaustion. Close to 3,000 cases were reported on Sunday alone. Now, hot weather is not new for Mecca. It has almost always seen a hot climate, and this has not bothered the Hajj in the past, which has been conducted in the same way for centuries now. But global warming is making the heat severe and the infrastructure can't seem to keep up. Scientists say that by 2040, Hajj is going to be fatal. And it won't be an isolated scenario. By 2050, India will be among the first places on earth where temperatures cross survivability limits. And we can already see the signs. North India is reeling under a prolonged heat wave. Since March, 40,000 cases of heat stroke have been reported. At least 110 people have died, and the capital, Delhi, has seen a punishing summer. Daily temperatures are crossing 40 degrees Celsius and peaking at nearly 50 degrees. There are water shortages and power outages. This week, electricity demand reached an all-time high. Climate change is causing the current infrastructure to fail. In some cases, it is making deadly heat waves 35 times more likely. Like in the case of the United States, much of the country is sweltering. There's a record-breaking heat wave. 75 million people are under extreme heat alerts. That is 1 in 5 people.
We want to be clear, this is extremely hot for June, and New Yorkers should not underestimate the heat. With climate change leading to more frequent and intense heat, summers are different than they were before, and so we should expect and be prepared for the hot weather that is coming. If this is an indication, we're just starting out the summer months. We could only expect even more as the summer continues to move forward.
Indeed, we can. No continent is safe from extreme heat. Look at Europe. It is the fastest warming continent on Earth. Here, temperatures are rising at twice the global average. Greece is among the worst affected. It is witnessing the earliest heat wave on record, which has warranted school closures, restrictions, and even caused deaths. France is in the same boat. It is braving an early heat wave, which is worrying because the Olympic Games will be held in Paris next month. The last Summer Olympics in Tokyo were the hottest in history, with temperatures reaching 32 degrees. Paris is expected to break the record. Now, I know 32 degrees does not seem like much. For many countries, this barely qualifies as dangerous. But it is. In June, summer has barely begun for France. So Paris temperature should be between 14 to 24 degrees Celsius. That is the average. But this year, it has already crossed 30 degrees. The sudden increase can seem unbearable, because like most countries, France does not have the infrastructure to deal with such abnormal heat, meaning there could be a shortage of resources, additional stress on healthcare systems, heat-related illnesses, and even deaths. So the examples are everywhere. Heat is breaking record after record, and nations are baking. What are the governments doing about it? They're asking people to drink more water, not much else. Despite their promises, fossil fuel use has broken the global record. Under their watch, satellites like Elon Musk's Starlink are damaging the atmosphere. They're burning the ozone layer. So this is the gist of the matter. Governments have chosen delusion over action. We are not prepared for the future, while climate change chips away at our present. It is a catastrophe in the making. The weekend is almost here. Do you have any interesting plans? If it's a dingle day, maybe you can go out and meet some friends. If not, you can catch up on some gonk. Much needed fod plod could be a good choice as well. If you understand what I mean, then you're part of an exclusive club of linguists. I'm referring to the researchers in Antarctica. Antarctica is the coldest and one of the least inhabited continents in the world. It has only a few settlements made up of scientists and support staff. And they're so isolated from the rest of the world that their accents are changing, and now they're even speaking a whole new language. Here's a report.
This is Antarctica, a bleak, dark and remote place. This is the coldest continent on the planet, also the least inhabited, the only continent with no permanent human habitation. But this doesn't mean that Antarctica has no humans. It does have some settlements in the form of research stations. There are only a handful of bases. They are scattered across the 14 million square kilometer frozen landscape, and they are a temporary home to scientists and support staff. They live in Antarctica for some parts of the year, usually on a rotating basis. During this time, they brave the conditions, they work, eat and socialize while almost totally cut off from the world. And this changes how they speak. A new study is out, a world-first study into colloquial Antarctic language, and it shows that the so-called winterers have developed their own language. It's a unique colloquialism with a baffling array of words that won't make much sense to anyone who's not a regular in Antarctica. Instead of sleep, people say gonk. Instead of cleaning, they say gash. A clear blue sky day becomes dingle day, and picking up rubbish is called fod plod. These are only a few of many such words. They sound bizarre, but we aren't making this up. This language cropped up as happenstance. There's not much science behind it, except some logic. For instance, the fod in fod plod refers to foreign object debris. Well, you can trust a scientist to come up with that. There's another fascinating development. Amid all this conversing, people's accents are changing. During their stint in Antarctica, people have limited entertainment. They mostly only talk to each other. To speak to anyone in the outside world, satellite phone calls are required, which are quite expensive and are mostly avoided. And when the winterers talk to each other, something primitive happens. They memorize each other's speech, which influences their own speech production. Research bases in Antarctica consist of people from across the world. The common language is English, but the accents differ. So speakers infect each other with their pronunciations. Now, this is known to us through an Antarctic study. This experiment is the first of its kind. But the result is not entirely surprising. It has happened innumerable times throughout history. As groups of people become cut off from others, their accents, dialects, and languages diversify. This tells us why American English differs from British English. On a larger scale, this still happens in many cities where multiple cultures come together to produce their own dialects and accents. We see this in Europe due to its high levels of migration. For instance, over the past few years, a new kind of German is being spoken in Berlin. A new Swedish dialect is emerging in Stockholm as well. And this is bound to happen, which is also what makes language fun. It's not only fluid, but uniting. So, no matter how disconnected Antarctica remains, it retains linguistic traits with the world.
Vantage continues after a short break.
The collector of Kalakuruchi was transferred. New officials are now in place to take stock of the situation. Ministers have been deployed at Kalakuruchi to monitor the situation. At least 30 people have died so far in the hooch tragedy that took place in Kalakuruchi, and more than 30 are still hospitalized. Some of them are in critical condition as per the hospital authorities. So clearly the death toll could only increase in the coming hours, which is why politics over this is going to escalate, because just 1 year ago, which was in September September 2023, there were twin hooch tragedies reported in Tamil Nadu, one in Viluppuram and one in Chengalpattu districts, where 22 people lost their lives because of consumption of illicit liquor. And just a year later, yet another tragic incident took place in Kallakurichi, where at least 30 of them have died. The death toll could increase because we'll have to wait for the official information, but at least 30 of them have lost their lives because of consumption of illicit liquor. Remember, yesterday there was one person who was suspected to have carried at least 200 liters of illicit arak was arrested. Right now, investigation is on, probe is on to see if the 200 liters of illicit arak contains the deadly methanol. Because police officials say that prima facie investigation reveals that consumption of methanol led to the tragic incident where at least 30 people have lost their lives. Both the AIADMK and the BJP have in fact pointed fingers at the DMK, blaming the DMK, saying that the DMK has not learnt its lessons because just in 2023 we saw twin hooch tragedies in Tamil Nadu, and in less than a year yet another tragic incident took place. So they say that because of the administration.
Now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un gifts Russian President Putin a pair of dogs as the two bond over animals. Climate protesters spray paint on private jets in the UK, and Germany traffic light signals get a facelift courtesy the Euros. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 2001, General Pervez Musharraf was formally sworn in as Pakistan's president. This was after he removed then President Rafiq Tarar. This happened 2 years after Musharraf seized power from Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif in a military coup. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Hello and welcome to the late night edition with me, Ayushman Singh Jamwal. Ladies and gentlemen, our top story. The NTA continues to be under fire over charges of the paper leak and corruption with students on the war path. But now the UGC NET exam had to be cancelled over a suspected cyber attack. After first claiming there is no evidence of a paper leak, now Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan held a briefing where he said the government is tracking all developments in the paper leak cases, adding that a special panel will be formed to probe the NTA as well as the lapses that have emerged. This also comes as the BJP has linked the accused in the Bihar paper leak case to the RJD, claiming the accused were given access to papers via the aid of Tejasvi Yadav. But Dharmendra Pradhan has said he takes moral responsibility for the lapses and student welfare remains a top priority of the Education Ministry. Meanwhile, speaking exclusively to CNN News 18, Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan has said that voters have faith in the government's accountability and urges everyone to keep politics out of the matter. Pradhan says the government will not let the interests of students be compromised. A high-powered committee will look into the reforms needed for the NTA. Listen in, he was speaking to my colleague Payal Mehta.
सर, आपने वादा किया था कि कार्रवाई होगी और अभी सीबीआई ने केस भी रजिस्टर किया नेट मामले में। क्रिमिनल कॉन्स्पिरेसी और चीटिंग का केस लगाया गया है। क्या कहना चाहेंगे आप स्टूडेंट से जो लगातार इस खबर पे अपनी नज़र बनाए हुए हैं?
देखिए, मैं भारत की शिक्षा विभाग की दायित्वधारी के नाते मैं सभी को आश्वस्त करना चाहता हूँ, देश की विद्यार्थियों को आश्वस्त करना चाहता हूँ, ये सरकार आप ही के हैं। सरकार पारदर्शिता के लिए प्रतिबद्ध है। सरकार मेरिटियस विद्यार्थियों के साथ खड़ा है। सरकार विश्वास जन्माना चाहती है कि हम कोई भी गड़बड़ी को टॉलरेट नहीं करेंगे, आप भरोसा रखिए।
पर आपका ये कहना कि आप आश्वासन देना चाहते हैं स्टूडेंट्स ये भी जानना चाहते हैं सर कि इस तरह की चूक कैसे हुई, कहाँ हुई? बिहार का भी मामला सामने आ रहा है, वहाँ पे भी आपकी सरकार है। बहुत सारे लोग सवाल पूछ रहे हैं इस पे।
देखिए, एक घटना की तो हमने सीबीआई इंक्वायरी जिसकी जोड़ा बड़ा रामिफिकेशन है। भारत की कोई परीक्षा प्रणाली डार्क नेट में चला जाए, ये गहन अध्ययन की बात है। कौन है उसके लिए जिम्मेदार, कौन सी माफिया लोग उसके पीछे हैं, कौन गुनहगार है, अंदरूनी लोग कौन गुनहगार है, इसको सारे को ढूंढा जाएगा। बाकी नीट को लेके जो कुछ विसंगति आई तो मूलतः आई थी ग्रेस मार्क की। ये कोई विसंगति नहीं था, उसको एक प्रोसीजरियल इंटरप्रिटेशन के कारण कुछ विद्यार्थियों को मन में रोष आई, कुछों को कैसे ग्रेस मार्क मिल गया। उसके ऊपर भी फिर जब तहकीकात हुई, जब फिर एक्सपर्ट कमेटी बैठी, फिर री एग्जामिनेशन की बात हो गई। पटना में गड़बड़ी की कुछ अनामोलिस की ध्यान आई, उसको बिहार पुलिस ने पकड़ भी लिया है, सही समय पकड़ा है, गिरफ्तारियां हुई है, इंक्वायरी चल रही है, सारा विषय स्पष्ट हो रहा है और एक दो दिनों में और निर्णायक स्थिति में पहुंच जाएंगे।
सर, अभी जो बातें सामने आ रही है उसको लेकर के बहुत सारी राजनीति भी चल रही है, राजनीतिक बयान भी आ रहे हैं, पर आपका ये कहना कि मैं जिम्मेदारी लेता हूँ, मैं देश का शिक्षा मंत्री हूँ, ये आपको लगता है आश्वस्त करेगा स्टूडेंट्स को और उनके पेरेंट्स को खास करके?
देखिए, मैं एक पेरेंट हूँ, मैं दायित्व में हूँ। प्रजातंत्र में लोगों ने हमें भरोसा किया है, मेरे प्रधानमंत्री को भरोसा किया है। ये प्रजातंत्र है, मेरे को दायित्व तो लेना ही पड़ेगा। प्रजातंत्र में सिर्फ उंगली उठाने से नहीं होता है, दायित्व लेने, हम लोग दायित्व लेने वाले। हमने पिछले 10 साल में अथक परिश्रम किया। आखिर इस देश में पब्लिक एग्जामिनेशन में चीटिंग का प्रिवेंशन की कानून हम नहीं बनाया। हम दायित्व लेने वाले लोग हैं, हम विश्वास जन्माते हैं, हम भरोसा रखते हैं
कि बहुत सारे लोग
इस प्रकार की इस अभी लोगों के मन में जो स्थिति है मैं उसको समझता हूँ। इसलिए मैं आज के दिनों में एक ही निवेदन करूँगा, आप भरोसा रखिए, एक भी विद्यार्थी के हितों को समझौते में नहीं डालेंगे।
सर, कई लोगों ने जो नेट NFT उसके सवाल पे भी पूछे हैं, नेट के सवाल पे और बाकी सब की प्रक्रिया पे भी आपने थोड़ी देर पहले बताया कि एक हाई पावर्ड कमेटी भी सेटअप की जाएगी। उसमें कौन लोग रहेंगे, उनका कब तक टाइम बाउंड कुछ उनका मैंडेट होगा करने का कुछ काम?
देखिए, पिछले 6 सालों में देश की इस प्रकार की परीक्षाओं को NTA करता है। NTA को आधुनिक बनाना है, NTA को प्रोग्रेसिव बनाना है, NTA में इंटरनल रिफॉर्म्स की भी आवश्यकता है। इस बार जो परीक्षा हुए उसमें से कुछ विषय को और उजागर किया है। एक ऑटोनोमस बॉडी होने के नाते उनकी जैसे अकाउंटेबिलिटी, जैसे ट्रांसपेरेंसी और आनी चाहिए, उसको ध्यान देना ही पड़ेगा। इसीलिए सरकार ने तय किया है एक कमेटी बनाई जाएगी, विशेषज्ञों की कमेटी बनाई जाएगी, एक्सपर्ट्स की कमेटी बनाई जाएगी, समाज जीवन के प्रमुख लोग उसमें आएंगे और एक पारदर्शी तरीके से चीज़ों को उन्होंने रिकमेंड करेंगे। NTA की स्ट्रक्चर, उनकी फंक्शनिंग, उनकी एग्जामिनेशन प्रोसेस, उनकी डाटा मैनेजमेंट, उनकी ट्रांसपेरेंसी, ये सारे विषय को अकाउंटेबिलिटी और बढ़े, इस प्रकार की रिकमेंडेशन जल्द ही सरकार उसकी मैंडेट और कमेटी की समूह को घोषित करेगी।
एक आखिरी सवाल आपसे रहेगा कि राहुल गांधी ने कटाक्ष करा है आपकी सरकार के ऊपर, लगातार वो प्रहार करते हैं RSS और BJP के एजेंडा पे, और बहुत सारे लोग भी पूछ रहे हैं, विपक्ष में भी कई लोग हैं जो आपके मित्र हैं, वो पेरेंट्स भी, आप उनसे क्या कहना चाहेंगे इस मौके पर?
देखिए, मैं आज अभिभावक के नाते, एजुकेशन मंत्री के नाते मेरा पहला चिंता है मेरे विद्यार्थियों को मैं ऐसे भी कुछ ना प्रोवोक करूं, ना कहूं, कोई अफवाह, कोई भ्रमात्मक या कोई उत्तेजना की बात ना कहूं कि जो उनके मन को प्रभावित करे, जो उनको निष्पक्षता से दूर ले जाए। मेरे दायित्व है सबको निवेदन करना, आप भरोसा रखिए, ठीक होगा।
And I'm joined by my colleague Payal Mehta, who had that conversation with Dharmendra Pradhan. So, Payal, when it comes to the way forward, Dharmendra Pradhan making it very clear that while the opposition is saying that the NTA needs to be scrapped because it has lost all credibility, the body needs essential and deep-rooted reforms, and that is something the special panel will look into. He also mentioned to you that that if the NTA needs reforms, that does not mean officials of the NTA have been given a clean chit.
Well, absolutely. So Dharmendra Pradhan clarifying there that thing for once and for all, saying that the NTA is open to reforms and reforms will be carried out, and that's the reason this high-profile committee is being constituted. And various people, right from psychologists to educationalists, various people from the society will be a member of that, and it is going to in fact present its report and also take views from various stakeholders as to how to improve this. And he also said that this is the same body which has conducted exams for the last 6 years, so they have decent credibility for themselves. But the most assuring thing that Dharmendra Pradhan today said to the people of the country, especially the parents and the students, is that he takes accountability. He also went on to mention in his press conference earlier that this is an institutional failure and they will definitely be looking into it. So within hours of Mr. Pradhan speaking about it, you already saw that the CBI had registered a case, in the entire matter. Criminal conspiracy and, of course, cheating have been registered as a case. And Mr. Pradhan also coming out to the defense of the government, upon the attacks that the opposition have made, saying that this is the same government that actually in the last session of Parliament, Ayushman had brought in a bill to prevent cheating cases, cases of cheating and cheating in exams as well, because you saw the huge repercussion that it had in the state of Rajasthan, where the BJP was able to sweep the election. They were able to overthrow the Ashok Gehlot government on the pretext of this examination cheating bill, which was promised by the government, and they promised an SIT as well. So obviously this is what Mr. Pradhan has been saying.
Right. Thank you, Payal, for getting us that exclusive conversation with Dharmendra Pradhan. But please stay with us because there seems to be another political controversy that's brewing. Now, BJP MP Bhartrihari Mahtab has been picked as the pro-tem speaker of the Lok Sabha. Mahtab will take oath in front of President Murmu before he begins to discharge his duties as pro-tem speaker. His role will be to oversee the swearing in of the newly elected MPs. Now, Jairam Ramesh of the Congress party has countered the appointment, saying by convention, the MP who has served the maximum term is appointed Speaker pro tem for the first 2 days. The senior-most MP in the 18th Lok Sabha is Kodikunil Suresh of the Congress party. Instead, a 7-term MP, Bhartrihari Mahtab, has been appointed pro tem Speaker. He was a BJD MP for 6 terms and is now a BJP MP. So another point of contention as we head into Parliament. Payal continues to be with us on the broadcast. So Payal, decode this flashpoint for us.
Well, of course, the numbers are definitely there in the favor of the NDA, and the NDA is making the most of it. You also saw last time around also, there was this argument which has been brought to the fore, given the fact that Maneka Gandhi was the senior-most MP, or the party decided to put somebody else as a pro-tem speaker. The role of the pro-tem speaker over the next 2 days will be, when the Parliament resumes, will be to give, to make sure that the MPs take oath as well. So obviously, politics has already broken out on the entire issue, but within the BJP fold also, there are multiple MPs who were 7 times MP. There was Radha Mohan Singh in the fold, there was Fagan Singh Kulast in the fold as well. But the BJP had decided to go with this face of Bhartrihari Mahtab, who is an educated politician. He's a very well-respected politician. But of course, the opposition parties are pulling up the government, essentially saying that why were you unfair? To which the government has already said, Ayushman, that there has been also a panel of another 4 people which have been formed, which also includes a senior parliamentarian like Sudhir Bandyopadhyay, who's a TMC party leader also in both houses. So there's no need for such a politics to really come in. But of course, the Congress party is also asking multiple questions to the BJP. They also understand the BJP can be brought under pressure given the fact that the numbers are not as comfortable for the BJP as it was in 2014 and 2019. So various arguments coming in. But the government says that they put forth the best name they could have, and the mandate of the government is still with the BJP. So obviously they do not buy the argument of the opposition, because they basically say that in the panel you have a TMC and member of parliament. You also have Mr. Suresh, who is part of the panel as well.
Absolutely, and we're getting a counter from the BJP where Amit Malviya has tweeted, with 98 seats, it is not for the Congress to decide who is the pro tem speaker. It is above their pay grade. So instead of punching above their weight, the Congress must pick veteran MP Kodakunal Suresh as the LOP. Anyway, third time failed, Rahul Gandhi is not up to it. So that sharp attack coming in against Rahul Gandhi from Amit Malviya. Thank you, Payal, for getting us that piece of breaking news. Now shifting focus, ladies and gentlemen, to the entire NTA scandal where the Congress party has now reacted to Dharmendra Pradhan's assurance. Pawan Kheda of the Congress has said a few days back Pradhan was not willing to accept that there is a paper leak, and today he is taking moral responsibility. The Congress leader says he must resign from his post if he really takes the moral responsibility. Listen in.
So Dharmendra Pradhan, who was in a hurry to give a clean chit to NTA just about 48 hours ago, he was not even buying any argument that there could be some merit in what the students were protesting against. In fact, he called those protests sponsored protests. And now he's taking moral responsibility. What is moral responsibility? The minister must resign if he really thinks that he can take moral responsibility. It's not enough. What about the children, their future? So many lakhs of students who gave exams of NET. Now they have to go back again. The minister can just not get away by saying that I take moral responsibility. And what committee is he talking about? So nobody has any faith in any such committee which the minister is talking about. Sorry, Mr. Minister, your moral responsibility is not enough and you must apologize for earlier giving clean chit to NTA.
So that has become the point of contention, something the opposition has latched on to. I'm joined by my colleague Pallavi Ghosh on the broadcast. So Pallavi, this will certainly be a storm in Parliament. Dharmendra Pradhan earlier said there is no evidence of a paper leak, and in today's briefing he said we are closely tracking all the developments in the paper leak cases, given the fact that the BJP in Bihar is also trying to spin the entire scandal as linking it to the RJD, the Congress ally, the RJD in the state of Bihar. So while the war of words is only escalating and the Congress party clearly has no faith even in the special panel that Dharmendra Pradhan has announced, this will surely be the flashpoint inside Parliament.
Yes, I mean, one thing is very clear that the opposition parties have refused to be placated by the press conference which was done by Dharmendra Pradhan. One, why is the committee being formed now? Why is there no representative from the opposition side? Why shouldn't the minister resign? Because he had begun from day one by saying that there were no irregularities. Look, issues like children, when it comes to women, these become very emotive and powerful vote bank issues as well. And with a belligerent opposition, Ayushman, it's going to be very difficult for them to be calmed down. And I think as they made very clear, day one itself, they're going to start making this an issue, allowing the PM as well as, of course, the HRD minister.
Right, so that is the pitch coming in from the opposition camp. Thank you, Pallavi, for joining us on the broadcast. The opposition making it very clear they have no faith in this special panel that has been announced by Dharmendra Pradhan, saying he earlier said that there is no evidence of a paper leak, now saying that we will track all the developments coming in when it comes to the investigations into the paper leak scandal. So given the change in stance of Dharmendra Pradhan, while he maintains that the centre's commitment is to student welfare, the opposition camp is not buying it, now demanding Dharmendra Pradhan's resignation. But more developments coming in. This is concerning the investigation, ladies and gentlemen, into the cancellation of the UGC NET exam. Now, what we are learning is that the CBI has filed an FIR in the UGC NET exam case. Remember, the Education Ministry had announced yesterday that the NET exam had been cancelled because of a suspected cyber attack. The Joint Secretary of the Ministry of Education gave that briefing today, saying that the MHA unit of cybersecurity had said that the entire NET infrastructure had been compromised. And now what we are learning is that the CBI has filed an FIR in the case pertaining to sections of criminal conspiracy as well as cheating. That is the piece of breaking news that's coming in. I'm joined by my colleague Ananya Bhatnagar to get more details. Ananya, over to you.
Well, definitely, after, in fact, the UGC NET was cancelled, there was a lot of students who were in a limbo because, it is one of the most prestigious examinations. This is the second setback to the central government after, the NEET examinations, and the exam had to be cancelled. And, in fact, what has come to light from the MHA sources is that, the MHA unit of cybersecurity had found that, certain details of, in fact, this particular UGC NET were actually leaked on the dark web. And not only this, the whole NET system was actually compromised, and that's exactly why the government had to cancel that particular examination. The NTA had to take that particular decision. And post that, the Central Bureau of Investigation has now kicked in. It has registered an FIR and two major sections. One with regards to the criminal conspiracy, and the second one regarding to the cheating has been, invoked of the Indian Penal Code. Sections of the Indian Penal Code have been invoked in, and more, sections would be added post the investigation actually proceeds forward in this particular case. What would be interesting to see is who would be arrested and when will these arrests take place, and how has the system of the net been compromised? That is a big question mark, because it is, a very secured system that has now been compromised on the dark web. So, what kind of information was leaked on the dark web is also something that we'll have to, ascertain. So, definitely the Central Bureau of Investigation would be looking into it. But what happens is something that we'll have to wait and watch for.
Right, but Ananya, at the same time, nothing this big happens without any sense of compromise from within. So clearly, when it comes to the officials involved in the UGC NET exam, they will be under the scanner of the CBI.
Well, definitely, Ayushman, even the UGC NET officials would be under the scanner of the central agency, and though it is said that this kind of a breach does not happen without any internal security, but since there are a lot of technological advancements and there are a lot of viruses and in fact Trojans that are there which can be actually hacked, and such things can also happen. So all possibilities would be looked into by the Central Investigation Agency, and it would be seen that whether it was a cyber attack or was it somebody from the within that actually leaked it on the dark web. So all of this would only be clear after the clear investigation of the Central Bureau of Investigation takes place in this particular case.
Absolutely. Ananya, please stay with us, because let's shift focus to the other big political story, ladies and gentlemen. After bail to Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal, a mega twister in the Liquorgate case, now top ED sources have said the ED will move the Delhi High Court tomorrow. The order of the duty magistrate, this is what top ED sources say, was surprising. The ED will ask the court to put a stay on the order. So we could see those legal developments take place tomorrow morning itself, after the huge shot in the arm to the Aam Aadmi Party, with Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal being granted bail in the Liquorgate case. My colleague Ananya continues to be with us on the broadcast. So Ananya, at this point that top ED sources are telling CNN News 18 that the order of the duty magistrate is surprising. Decode this for us further.
Well, definitely, the top ED sources, the Enforcement Directorate have confirmed to our colleague Anshul Singh that, this order was actually surprising, and a challenge to that would be made tomorrow itself by the Enforcement Directorate and its legal team before the Delhi High Court. So, what would be interesting to see is that whether or not, a stay would be granted on this particular order. But if you go by the precedents in the previous cases, whenever an order with regards to the liberty of a person is, passed, it is very unlikely that a stay is actually granted on that. So we'll have to wait and watch as to how things pan out. But the Enforcement Directorate is very hopeful that it will secure a stay in this particular case. But what would be interesting, Ayushman, is that still the detailed order copy is not out yet, and the reasonings as to why this bail has been granted, how have the 45 riggers been compromised, or how have they been satisfied, is something that we'll have to wait and watch for, because the Enforcement Directorate's main claim since the very beginning has been that, Arvind Kejriwal is somebody who's the main key conspirator in this particular case. And not only this, he is also vicariously liable under Section 70 of the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. He is the national convener of this particular party. In fact, he was one of the biggest bribe takers in this particular case, is what the Enforcement Directorate alleges. 100 crores was the bribe that he had demanded from K. Kavita, of which 50 crore was being arranged by Manguta Srinivasan Reddy, while the other half was being arranged by K. Kavita and her team as well. So how will this be, used by the Enforcement Directorate? How would the rigors of Section 45, the twin conditions of bail, which are very, difficult to satisfy, would be, justified by the Enforcement Directorate, is something that would be interesting to see tomorrow when the Enforcement Directorate comes before the Delhi High Court seeking a stay on this particular order that's been passed by the special CBI judge who was the duty judge today, Ms. Nyaya Bindu. So we'll have to wait and watch as to how things pan out. But definitely, this is a big shocker coming in for the Enforcement Directorate, and a shot in the arm for the Aam Aadmi Party, both legally and politically.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ananya, for getting us that piece of breaking news. So a huge shot in the arm for the Aam Aadmi Party, which has gone hammer and tongs, saying that this entire case is just vendetta politics by the BJP government. And now Arvind Kejriwal is out on bail. But top sources are telling us that the ED will challenge this order in the Delhi High Court tomorrow. Let's listen in to the reactions coming in, as the war of words is only escalating.
मुख्यमंत्री अरविंद केजरीवाल जी की एक लोअर कोर्ट यानी कि राउज एवेन्यू कोर्ट से जमानत मिलना मुझे लगता है ना सिर्फ दिल्ली और आम आदमी पार्टी के लिए, पूरे देश के लिए एक मील का पत्थर साबित होगी। हमारी पूरी न्याय व्यवस्था के अंदर ये फैसला एक बहुत बड़ी मिसाल बनेगा। उसका बड़ा कारण ये है कि पीएमएलए के मामलों में अक्सर ये देखा जा रहा था कि कोई भी राहत अगर किसी को मिलती है तो लोअर कोर्ट से नहीं, हाई कोर्ट से नहीं, सुप्रीम कोर्ट में जाके कोई राहत मिलती है। मुझे ऐसा लगता है सभी जगह लोअर जुडिशियरी के अंदर एक रोशनी का काम करेगी।
अरविंद केजरीवाल जी को जमानत मिलने पर आम आदमी पार्टी कह रही है सत्यमेव जयते, ये जीत हुई है। अगर ये जीत है जमानत मिलना, मैं बताना चाहता हूं देश के अंदर अभी तक देश के अंदर कोई सिंगल भी आदमी ऐसा नहीं है जो करप्शन केस में अरेस्ट हुआ उसको जमानत ना मिली हो सजा होने से पहले, सबको मिली है। यहां तक कि सुखराम जी जैसे लोग जिनके घरों से अरबों रुपया मिला था उनको भी मिली है। लालू प्रसाद यादव जी जिन्होंने चारा घोटाले के अंदर करोड़ों रुपए उनके घर से मिला था, अरबों रुपया, उनको भी जमानत मिली है। जमानत मिलने का मतलब ये नहीं है कि आज आप कहें हमारे खिलाफ सबूत नहीं है। अब कि आपके खिलाफ सबूत थे, इसीलिए तो उसी कोर्ट ने आपको पहले जेल में भेजा, और आज तो अब ये भी नहीं अरविंद केजरीवाल जी कह सकते कोर्ट बायस्ड है। उसी कोर्ट ने आपको जमानत दी क्योंकि सबूत आपके खिलाफ थे, इसीलिए आपको 6 महीने उसी कोर्ट ने जेल में रखा।
देखिए, इस बेल के ऑर्डर के आने के बाद भारतीय जनता पार्टी के और भाजपा के साथ साजिश करने वाले तमाम लोगों के चेहरे पर काली खिड़ी है। ये सच्चाई की जीत है। हम डे 1 से कह रहे हैं कि पूरा का पूरा मामला फेक है, फर्जी है। हम कोर्ट के इस फैसले का सम्मान करते हैं सर झुका के। और आप देखिएगा आज अरविंद जी बाहर आ रहे हैं। इस फर्जी आरोप में जितने भी नेता आम आदमी पार्टी गिरफ्तार हैं सब लोग बाहर आएंगे, सत्यमेव जयते।
एक ऐसे समय में जब देश के अंदर एक जनादेश आया है इस सरकार के खिलाफ, मौजूदा सरकार के खिलाफ, तो मुझे लगता है कि अरविंद केजरीवाल का ऐसे वक्त में बाहर आना लोकतंत्र को मजबूती देगा। और दिल्ली की जनता के लिए, देश की जनता के लिए आज बहुत खुशी का दिन है, बहुत बड़ी खबर है। हम सब लोग उत्साहित हैं इस खबर को सुन के। और मैं माननीय न्यायालय का जो ये फैसला आया है उसको सर झुका के नमन करता हूं। बहुत बड़ा फैसला उन्होंने दिया है।
देखिए, बहुत बड़ा दिन हम सबके लिए। आज मैं माननीय कोर्ट को धन्यवाद करता हूं, माननीय जज साहिबा का धन्यवाद करता हूं। मुझे यह लगता है कि आज का दिन ये साबित हुआ जो अरविंद केजरीवाल पहले दिन से कह रहे थे कि ये भ्रष्टाचार की जांच नहीं हो रही है, ये अरविंद केजरीवाल जी को, आम आदमी पार्टी को बदनाम करने की साजिश की जा रही है। आज जो अरविंद केजरीवाल डे 1 से कह रहे थे आज वो साबित हुआ। और माननीय कोर्ट ने दूध का दूध, पानी का पानी कर दिया। भ्रष्टाचार कहीं नहीं है, झूठे खेत में सभी नेताओं को फंसाया गया है। तो अब दूध का दूध, पानी का पानी देश के सामने है।
So while Aam Aadmi Party workers are celebrating, Arvind Kejriwal is still not out of the woods yet, ladies and gentlemen, and the war of words will only escalate between the Aam Aadmi Party and the BJP. But that's all we have to pack in on the show. Good night and take care.
Yet another tragedy took place because of illicit liquor being made available freely under the DMK rule. That's the question that both the BJP and the AIADMK have raised, saying that the DMK has not learnt its lessons, have not taken measures to stop the illicit sale of liquor and distribution of methanol. That's the word coming in from the AIADMK and the BJP. This will be raked up in the assembly session. Today, the assembly session met, condoled the death of those who lost their lives after consumption of illicit liquor. But tomorrow, we could expect a heated debate in the assembly over hooch tragedy, with both the AIADMK and the BJP blaming the DMK. DMK meanwhile says that action has been taken against those who were responsible for this, but that is not enough, is what the opposition says. Politics over hooch tragedy in Kallakurchi has only escalated, with the AIADMK General Secretary and Leader of Opposition Edappadi Palanisamy planning to visit Kallakurchi Government Hospital to take stock of the situation. DMK meanwhile says that action has been taken against the district administration who were responsible for the hooch tragedy. The superintendent of police has been suspended. The collector of Kallakurchi was transferred. New officials are now in place to take stock of the situation. Ministers have been deployed at Kallakurchi to monitor the situation. At least 30 people have died so far in the hooch tragedy that took place in Kallakurichi, and more than 30 are still hospitalized. Some of them are in critical condition as per the hospital authorities. So clearly the death toll could only increase in the coming hours, which is why politics over this is going to escalate, because just 1 year ago, which was in September 2023, there were twin hooch tragedies reported in Tamil Nadu, one in Viluppuram and one in Chengalpattu districts, where 22 people lost their lives because of consumption of illicit liquor. And just a year later, yet another tragic incident took place in Kallakurichi.